do you play with the system sound APIs? Well, the first thing you do is you have to register your sound and get a sound ID back. Then you can take that ID and you can play the sound. And you can, if you want, get a callback for that sound ID when it's done playing. Here's how you do it. Let's say you have a URL. You know where your sound is as part of your bundle. You call this audio services, create system sound ID, and you pass in the URL, and it will return to you. I believe it's an int32, but it's the system sound ID type that you'll get back. Then when you want to play it, you pass that ID down to audio services play system sound, and you're done. When you're done with that sound, so you may want to keep that sound around for a little while. Let's say you have this alert that you play often. You may just want one of these. You can keep it around for the duration of your app. But when you want to dispose of it, when you want to move on, you can have several of these existing at the same time. But when you want to clean up, because we're all good citizens, you're going to call audio services dispose system sound ID. And also memory warnings, which you've heard us preach quite often. Because these are pieces of data that you can get back at any time, the URLs tend to be from your bundles, then we would encourage that you dispose the sound as soon as you get a memory warning, and then just recreate it when you need it again. This is also how you do vibration. So on the phone, there's a vibrator. If you toggle the ringer switch, you'll feel it. If you mute your audio and you get a phone call, you'll feel it. You can actually trigger this programmatically as well. The vibrator has a system sound ID of its own. And you pass that in, it's system-wide. You pass that into audio services, play system sound, and it'll vibrate the phone for some fixed amount of time, half a second, I think. Maybe more, maybe 0.75 or something like that. But if you want to do, if you're making a game and you want the phone to vibrate because they just ran into an enemy or something like that, then this is how to get that physical feedback to the user. Now, not all sounds are AIFF and WAVE, and there are tons of audio tools on the market. There's actually there's a command line one that comes with the Mac that would help you convert any sounds you want to AIFF and WAVE. And it's AF convert, supports a bunch of input and output files formats. If you do user bin AF convert -H, it should tell you all the arguments that you can use. Or the man page will work as well. But it'll help you convert any of your sounds to system sounds so you can include into your app. So here's an example. AF convert -F means that it wants AIFF. -D means it wants an int16. The BEI16 is an int16 format. Input MP3, so it takes an MP3 in this case and generates the AIFF on the way out. OK, so that's the system sound API. Pretty simple, not too powerful, but not intended to be. When we go a step further down the path of complexity, we look at the AV audio player. An AV audio player, it will take longer sounds. It basically takes a URL, and it'll play that. And you can have several of them running at the same time. It can be files that are stored on disk or in memory. It'll actually, if you have something that's on disk, it'll actually stream that off the disk for you in an efficient manner as it needs it. You can do transport controls on it, so play, seek, pause. You can get metering information. So if you want to throw up audio level meters, right? You're generating some sound. Sorry, you're playing some sound, and you want to show like the amplitude going up and down. You actually get, I think it's callbacks for the metering information. Again, you can play several of them together. It's Cocoa APIs, so all stuff you're familiar with by now. And it supports a lot of different formats. So the audio file API is something that is part of the audio toolbox, and I'll talk about audio toolbox in a moment. But the audio file API has built-in support for a couple dozen different audio formats. Anything that supports is supported by AV Audio Player. Here's an example. So if I have a path in my bundle that's let's say a piece of music. I call path a resource. I turn that into a URL, stuff we've seen before. But when I want to initialize the player, I say init with contents of URL. I allocate and then init with contents of URL, and I have an AV audio player. Now I can start playback. I can pause playback. I can change the current time of playback, and we'll see a demo of this in a moment. And again, you can actually set yourself as the delegate for the audio player. So the delegate methods that will come back are, it'll tell you when playback is done. It'll tell you when playback stopped. It'll tell you when there are decode errors. So if there's like a poorly encoded MP3 that for some reason it just can't parse, it'll tell you about that as well. And it'll also give you these delegate callbacks for interruptions. So if you get a phone call, remember I said the system is who really owns the audio here. If it interrupts your audio, it will tell you. So if you get a phone call in the middle of the song that you're playing, it'll tell you. And you can choose at that time to pause playback, and then it'll tell you when the interruption is done, and then you can resume playback, which might be a little more elegant than just letting it, if you don't respond to them, I think it'll just keep playing. It'll actually be silenced, but it'll keep playing, so your time will have moved. And actually, if you think about, if you ever play a podcast or an audiobook on the phone, and a phone call comes in, you want that thing to stop, right? Because if I lose 5 minutes in an audiobook and then I have to seek back and forth to find it's a pain in the butt. So respond to these interruptions. Yeah. So audio sessions. We've already had some questions on the forums about this, but there are different ways that your application can deal with audio. Okay. You may want to play audio even though the ringer switch is off. You may want right. So, sorry. Okay. If you may want your audio to keep playing when the ringer switch is off. You may want to pause the iPod's playback. If the iPod is playing when they launch your app, you may want to stop that. You may want it to continue, right? So let's say you're making a piano app where you want to play back to something on the iPod. That's a case where you want the iPod music to keep playing and you want to throw your sounds on top. So the way the system solves this is it has a set of audio sessions, and they're categories. Basically, there's about 6 or 7 of them, and you can say that your app is meant for playback and recording, it's meant for just recording, it's meant for media playback, or it's meant for ambient sound, right? And ambient sound, I think one of the properties there is if you're playing audio and you tell the system that you're an ambient sound, when the user locks the device, it'll actually stop playback. So yeah, a few different ways to do that. Take a look at the enum for audio sessions. And if you're doing any audio, especially in your final project, take a look at those, because you'll want to specify one or you'll get the behavior that you don't want. So we'll do a little demo. Oh, right, default sessions. So, right, one other thing to say here about sessions is you can actually customize them any way you want, and there are a few different properties that you can set up. But there are a few default sessions that you can go with. You can tell the system to mute other sounds when you play yours. All right? Again, so if the iPod is playing, you may want it to mute when you start playing. So you can tell it specifically to respect or not respect the mute switch. And then the ambient example I gave is a case where they say, yes, mute the audio when the user locks the device. So yeah, take a look at those. Yeah?
What's an example of when you would not want to respect the mute switch?
Question is, what's an example of when you may not want to respect the mute switch? Well, that's your policy decision, right? So if you have, you may have seen some games, they keep playing audio even though the ringer switch is off, right? Yeah, I don't know. I like to use the ringer switch to turn it off, but you also have the volume controls, right? So, yeah, I guess I don't have a good example for that.
I just read something the other day that said what our policy was officially. I can't remember. I'll find it.
Yeah, I guess so. Josh was saying that there is a policy for when you should do that. That check the website and I can find out more. Okay, I should give this away. So, what's the API to use for short sounds? Yeah.
System sound API.
Hey, somebody's taking notes here. Okay, so here I've got an application